Two very special films are screening in Sydney, and also will be screening at other venues, hopefully. A short film called Dreyfus Drei, written and directed by Ella Dreyfus, and Displaced, a feature documentary directed by Sharon Ryba-Kahn. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to both Ella and Sharon about their films. Welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Hello, Peter. What a great joy to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure. Good to talk to you both. Now, this film deals with some very tricky issues, obviously, about second, third generation survivors of the Holocaust, or of parents who survived or grandparents who survived and others who died, and dealing with that issue of the Shoah and how that impacts today on people who were not directly impacted, but still has an impact. So can I first start with you, Ella, in making your short film, which features George Dreyfus, who's well known as a musician, etc. What was the concept behind that? What were you hoping to achieve in making that film?
Well, I think I was hoping to achieve things consciously that were written up on paper, and then unconsciously, I think I was hoping to achieve other things which revealed themselves to me throughout the film, which I'd be happy to talk to you about more. The ideas for the film came on the back of two other projects I had done, perhaps 10 and 5 years ago, which were my first foray into examining my own European Jewish background, because really up until about the age of 49, I'd never stepped foot in Europe, Peter. And as a practicing artist, my work had been about other concerns. And it was really only later in life, after my father died, which is now 25 years ago, that I got the courage to actually even turn in the direction of Europe. And although I knew we were of a German background, I knew very little. And so over the last 10 to 15 years, I started to ponder my past and look at why it is that it was so difficult for me to face up to our Holocaust background and visit Germany, a short trip and then a slightly longer one, And then the ideas build and build. And mostly I've been a still photographer and a installation artist. But this time I knew that I had to make a moving image, get the movement in there, particularly because my uncle George was 93 at the time when I started making it, 92 when I proposed the idea to him, and now he's 94. And really to capture the sound of him, the voice of him, the whole, it just had to be a film. So this story got made in a new medium for me and a new visual language.
Sure. I can fully understand you being reticent to go back to Germany. My mother, German and Jewish, was exactly the same. And in fact, she was invited back and then hated every minute of it. Her synagogue had disappeared, and she thought everyone was still a Nazi, and that was the end of it for her. So it is very, very difficult. I absolutely understand. Yeah.
Mm. Thank you. I felt like there was just a black cloud hanging over it, and it was really a no-go zone in our family. And my father was prone to get up and walk out and leave the room. Like when I was pregnant the first time, and we were trying to have an adult discussion. If it's a boy, will we circumcise the baby? And he is like, his whole body just screams. It's like, he's out of there. He's gone. Well, where's Dad? Well, he just cannot cope with difficult conversations. So you can imagine that any queries about his past, and he was 12 when he arrived in Australia, so he had a good solid 12 years of childhood in Germany. He just vacated, disappeared, went underground. Who knows what happened to his psyche, but really it was a no-go zone. So for me, that was like a black cloud hanging over our family that we were not allowed to talk about.
Sure.
Consequently, made me very afraid of meeting Germans, afraid of going even to Europe, let alone Germany.
Sure, absolutely understand. So Sharon, let's bring you into this, and let's talk about your film and the concept behind it and what you are hoping to achieve. And boy, I must admit, your difficult dialogue and communication with your father is quite incredible.
Yeah, well, being born and raised in Germany, but knowing that you're not German, knowing that you're actually a French Israeli woman, and that was always very important to my mother. So this is how I grew up. I grew up as a Jewish girl until the age of 14, living in Germany, but not being German, and also never really feeling German. Like, you could have said, I speak the language perfectly, right? I have no accent. I was born there. You could say, oh, well, she must have felt like a German then, right? Most people would assume that. Well, no, she didn't. She felt like a foreigner. She, the first kind of experiences I've had, and I'm coming now to why I needed to make this film, were also racist experiences because of the way I looked. Because, believe it or not, looking the way I did as a little girl, I was the darkest child in the class. This is what one needs to think of. So basically, having racist and anti-Semitic experience from the very get-go, I knew something was really, really off. And still, as a teenager, I accepted, being in Germany as is, meaning, you accept the culture, you live with the kind of discrimination, you learn to live with it, and then you just move on and have a life, right? Of course, I lived like 10 years abroad. So now, when I got back to Germany, when I was 26, I started getting into the film industry. And essentially, Displaced is my second feature-length film. And Displaced is a film that deals with the question, how does it feel to be a Jewish woman in Germany? This was the idea. And the relationship with my father is the key to the answer, because without him, I would not be in Germany, because it is his parents who, after surviving the Shoah, moved to Germany. This is a big part of the film, so I'm not going to say too much to keep it interesting. So there are two elements. There's, on the one side, the personal inner story. I wanted to show that trauma was present. I wanted to see how difficult it is between second and third generation. We started speaking a lot about third generation. How does it feel like to be a third generation of survivor of the Shoah? Of course, now, mind me, I speak from my experience in Germany, right? Not in Australia. So if anything that I said sounds like funny or not, doesn't relate, then I'm sorry. This is my experience. And really, what I wanted was to break the taboo that I had felt existed between non-Jewish Germans and Jewish-speaking Germans. So that was the real idea behind it. And using my family history and showing how that narrative really impacted my family, like being transparent about it, would essentially show that we're all affected by it, but in a very, very different manner. And that therefore, because my family has gone through what it has, and they are what they are because of it, not only, everyone is a responsible adult, but that therefore we need to start understanding that, that we are co-responsible also for the kind of reality we create today.
What a terrific explanation. Thank you for that. That's, and that comes through in your film. And yes, I know about your first feature film, Recognition, which achieved quite a lot of notoriety and strong impact, etc. So well done on that. I want to go back to Ella. Ella, can you talk about the actual filmmaking process and the challenges that you faced in making this film, considering it's your first film?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to talk about them, and I also want to expand a little bit on the impetus for making the film, if I may, as well. Yep. You're a bit frozen, but can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Keep going.
Hello. Oh, good. Okay, that's all right. Your screen's frozen. That's fine. All right. Yeah, just before I get to the sort of technical challenges, I would like to just elaborate a little bit more on the concept of the film. For me, was about, and this is why I use the word dry, dry. I wanted to examine 3 generations of our family, and chose 3 people from the family: the Uncle George, who was born in Germany, myself, and then my younger cousin, his young son, Jonathan, who now lives in Germany. And I really wanted to unpack how the 3 generations approached their relationship with Germany differently and approach the concept of the return. What does it mean to return to Germany? And for George, as you would have seen in the film, he returned as a very young man fairly soon after the war to study, and subsequently many, many times. My generation, I never went there at all till later in life. Yet the next generation, his son, went there for his bar mitzvah present at age 13 and developed a very strong bond with it and called it his soul city. So he has now set up home and lives and works in Berlin. So I just found that a really fascinating paradigm to come at this complex relationship with Germany as Jews or as Australians, and where does that fit? So yeah, just back to the technical side. As a stills photographer, I have my own aesthetic and long history as a professional, but certainly the moving image is a very different world, and I really took a great leap in the dark. And fortunately, I was able to engage some fantastic professionals to work with. And so I worked with Johannes Westphal as a co-director and co-producer, who has his own company, Seven Peaks, in Berlin. And we had some fantastic cinematographers, one in Melbourne and one in Germany, in Berlin also, that I could work with. So it was a really lovely collaborative experience, especially from the photographic point of view, where I worked very closely with the cinematographers, setting up the frames, looking at them. But I also found it pretty hard, let's be honest, because I was the conceiver of the film, the writer of the concept, and then obviously did all the fundraising and proposals for grants and things like that. Then I was not only the protagonist to be filmed in it, as well as being the cinematographer with my colleagues behind the scenes, and the stills photographer to boot. But above all that is family. Oh my God, why didn't I make a film about some other subject that wasn't my family? Because not only did we have family to film and to encourage and twist their arm to be in the film, to put it nicely, but they were also creatives in the film. So Jonathan took his father's music and reworked it, and also worked with his wife Amy, and they created a whole soundtrack. So we're juggling multiple roles here, this Dreyfus family, and it was hard. It was hard, but the results are fabulous. And one rather sad thing in it is we filmed in Sydney. I wanted to show very much the continuity of Jewish family life. And from my father, Richard, he became more and more, as he got older, very devout in his practice, and was very involved in many levels of Jewish organization, particularly education, Zionism, Friends of Hebrew University, you name it. He was on every committee in town. And it was very important to him, continuity. So we were brought up in a strong Jewish home. And so I wanted to show that in the film. And my sister agreed for me to bring the camera crew into the second night Passover celebrations on second night Seder. And fortunately, no one's terribly observant, so they didn't mind all that. But the sad thing was Rebecca was dying at the time, and only 4 weeks after we filmed, she actually died. So, it's a very poignant film from that perspective. And the final scenes showing the Passover Seder and the singing, and I framed the very last shot of the film through a window looking on at her. So you can hear there are just so many multiple levels of history, emotion, the technical, the financial. It was a big production for me, very meaningful and very professionally challenging.
Well, congratulations on doing that and completing it and having such an impact. It's a really powerful film. I especially identified with the Berlin Holocaust Memorial sequence, and that is such an incredible memorial, and that certainly comes through in your filming as well. So, yeah, great. Okay,
Thank
Sharon. Now, Sharon, yes, let's talk about the filming process for you and the challenges that you faced for this second film.
Well, so it goes more into the genesis of the financing. Essentially, when I had written the film, I had written this very beautiful essay. I'm in search, a daughter looking to understand who her father is, a second generation of survivor of the Holocaust, and going through Germany, talking to friends, exactly actually the people who are in the film, but in a very different approach. And on May 5th, I think it is now 2018, 2019. It seems all a blur, especially after the pandemic, or 2017. I don't remember. I received the funding from ZDF Kleines Fernsehspiel, which is the first channel in Germany, which was incredible news. You get the funding, you're like, oh my God, this is my graduation film at Film University. What an honor, it's happening. You never know until you get it, right? And then 2 days later, I had written a 65-page treatment. My father, after 7 years, chooses to call and say, hello, here I am. And the second call is already in the film. So everything changed from the minute. So the filmmaking process starts with writing the film, right? So I would like to say that the filmmaking process for me had a massive turn when we actually prepared to shoot. And then everything changed, the order changed, where we obviously started shooting in Tel Aviv first. So it was the first thing was, meeting my father after 7 years with a full camera team on. And, I was very, you could say, dogmatic. I didn't first have a coffee with him. I just, I went with the camera team and we met up. So I did that. That was very scary, but also very powerful, because it reminded me time and time again of the power of the camera. So essentially, to what extent do we as documentary filmmakers have a responsibility in how we portray people, and that we need to be very empathetic and very, I believe there are other genres of documentary filmmakers, but for me, making this film was about understanding that on the one side, the camera protected me, but on the other side, I was also co-responsible in who and how I would portray my father and also my friends. So this part of the filmmaking, then the shooting was, going to Poland was, it just, my intestines turned and twisted, figuring out everything that I found out that I don't want to divulge yet. But, because it's in the film and I'm hoping that people come see it, but just there's so many scenes that hurt so much along the way. And then, but the most difficult part was really the editing. 130 hours of material down to 90 minutes. And with every Jewish person in the film having their own Shoah history and survival history. You bleed as a person. You don't want to think about Landsmann in those moments. You're like, I don't know he did that. And you are torn between creating a film that will, sustain a structure, a narrative structure that's important, and at the same time, and that makes sense and that doesn't bore people to death. And at the same time, make sure that you have a narrative and that you really tell the stories of these people, or of, a specific narrative that makes sense. And yeah, so that was very, very challenging. And last but not least, realizing that I had really hit a point, a very painful point for many non-Jewish Germans, and that what I had actually done was working, meaning they were at times angry, at times shocked, at times, now it's been a 2-year journey. The film is on TV, since a couple of days, and, it's changed. Something's shifted. But when it came out, my heart was beating very, very loud about breaking the taboo, about Jewish discourse and non-Jewish discourse being, just shown for what it is, really. And it's not always pretty.
Incredible process. That's a great description. Have the people that you interviewed, family, etc., seen your film to respond to you about how they regard your film?
Of course. Everyone has seen it way before. I mean, this is part of my ethical approach. I wouldn't, I mean, I didn't give them final cut. I still, decide on the edits of the film. But yes, and I can even tell you that, knowing that we already know that my relationship with my father wasn't the simplest, it was quite a conversation, because I called him up when the film was finished and I said, okay, Dad, so I want you to know that, you are, it's not going to be, you're not going to feel like the best father on earth. Right. And funnily enough, he said to me, oh, actually, one of the toughest scenes between us is the scene that he liked the most. And he said, it's good, Sharon, that you asked me to do this. So in a way, I think that the confrontation with him was actually really positive in that sense. Yeah. And my other friends, well, yeah, my other friends, my German friends, I mean, some of them understood, others didn't. Yeah.
Which I can fully understand. Okay. And Ella, what about you in terms of how George and Jonathan and others responded to your film?
I think that a small percentage of my family have enjoyed the film and got something out of it, but the majority, I don't think they like it very much. It's really interesting. It's quite hard to talk to them about it, actually. I know everybody's seen it in different ways, whether it's been on the big screen or the small screen, but there hasn't been as much dialogue about it as I might have expected. There has been a bit more from younger generations, so like the third generation from some of my nephews, but yeah, my own siblings, oh yeah, good film, Elle. And off we go. And yes, apparently George didn't like it very much, but maybe because he wasn't in it for the whole time. That's quite possible. Other people got a bit of a look in. So there are those sorts of reasons. Yes, and I think it was fantastic that he agreed to be filmed and to tell his story, but I would say it wasn't so easy for him. I did stir up the past, and it was quite emotional for me. It starts off very formal, but we were with him 4 days in his home in Melbourne. And, it's at 94, it's quite hard having a film crew in there every single day relentlessly, and sort of prodding and prying and, it was quite hard. So I think that there's probably still more dialogue to be had, but I'm very grateful that, he allowed me in and we got the footage. And there's a lot more, like you would know, like Sharon has said, that isn't in there. And mine is only a 30-minute film. Sharon's is 90. So one day I'd love to do the director's cut. That would be really cool. That might be a few years later. But yeah, interesting responses. Also, just Sharon mentioned the pandemic, which is really important, because I left Australia when we were in lockdown, and when we were actually not allowed to even be on the street talking to your neighbours in case someone rang the cops and dogged you in. So I left. I had a huge amount of fear leaving. It was really hard, and I had to apply for the exemption to travel and get permission from the government. And it really was as if I didn't have enough fear anyway going to Germany. I find it quite fraught going to Germany the few times I've been. So on top of that was the pandemic, to leave Australia with the empty airports, to be going off, feeling like I'd never come back. And then I was one of the stranded Australians over there when all the flights were cancelled. So not that you could say for a minute that there were any correlations, but there was something for me at a very deep level about leaving home, Australia, during a really serious crisis, going to a country where they said, oh, there's no pandemic here, a lie, but they were behaving as life as normal, to research something that was going to be challenging and hard and exciting but hard, and then being stranded there and couldn't get out, and not knowing when I would ever return to my homeland. And then out of the blue, getting a last-minute flight into Brisbane, where I did the quarantine, and when there were 14 people on the plane from Singapore into Brisbane. And I was actually very distressed, you know, through all this pandemic stuff, that somehow had these correlations between the story of being ripped out of home and having to escape for your life. And of course, we know my situation wasn't Nazi Germany, but the pandemic had so much terror in it, especially here in Australia with all of our lockdowns. And I made it in that whole time and place of COVID-19. So it was very, very strange experience. And now that we're kind of out walking the streets again, you kind of forget about it, but it has a resonance and it has its legacy, and it's sort of hidden into the film as well.
Wow. Yes, I can imagine the stress that you're under and so on. It's incredible. Well, I'm interested to know how people can see this film. It's interesting how we've got the Jewish Film Festival on at the moment, and both of your films would have been ideal in that festival. But well, it's all up to Eddie, I suppose. But I'm sure you know Eddie Tamir. I know him well. But let's talk about how people in Australia, in Melbourne in particular, perhaps, can now see both of your films.
Well, certainly Sharon and I are screening both our films together in Sydney, only in about 4 weeks' time on the 5th of December. So this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for the films to be in dialogue with each other. Because I'm a second generation of survivors, Sharon is third. And as you can hear from what Sharon's told us, she was born in Germany. I was born in Australia. Like, how does all this marry together with, you know, being Jewish and where we belong and what our identity is? I think it's going to be a very exciting night. It's a one-off event. So I do encourage people listening to get onto Eventbrite right away and book themselves the ticket. Yes, Eddie didn't have our films in the festival, but he's kindly given us the cinemas. And we've already screened it in Melbourne my film has been screened at the Classic in Elston earlier this year in May. But my film will come back again to the Holocaust Museum and possibly other places next year, and I'll let people know. But for Sharon, this is the Australian premiere of Displaced. So this is an incredible moment because Sharon's film was seen on German television, and I think 250,000 people watched the film. And this is only 2 or 3 nights ago. So mazel tov to you, Sharon. What an achievement. And I'm very, very proud that my film will now be screened with your film.
Right. And I would like to say that without Ella, actually this Australian premiere simply wouldn't have happened. Let's just face the facts. I'm a lover of the facts in that sense. So it is thanks to Ella that we are screening. We're doing the screening together, and I am indeed a believer of you know, having films talk to one another. I think that the audience will have an incredible opportunity dealing with Jewish identity that ranges, you know, from Australia back to Poland, back to Israel, and of course through Germany, and how that really can impact us differently. And I think that is really something unique and special that will happen on December 5th. And I would love it to happen somewhere else, including Melbourne, since I'm actually based in Victoria. However, there is no plans for it as of right now, but you never know.
You never know. Okay, terrific. Look, it's been a pleasure talking to you both, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more we could be discussing, but I think that will whet people's appetite if they're in Sydney to go and see the film on both films on December 5th, and to look out for them again in Melbourne. Thank you so much, Ella and Sharon, for talking with me.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Shalom.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.